This week's story is all about Christmas. Now, before you run away screaming, I'm not talking about the everyday Christmas songs like Jingle Bells or Frosty the Snowman. A few of the traditional songs do have a special place in my music memories, though. Deck the Halls will always remind me of the time I actually spent learning the lyrics, what the words actually meant. I think it may have been that song where I first heard the term Bough of Holly. Silver Bells is really the only other regular Christmas song that gets stuck in my brain. The calm melody and imagery of that song brings me back to a snowfall in the city streets of my early childhood home. There was the lights flickering through the snowflakes. But no, I'm actually not going to talk about that. I'm going to be telling you about a couple more modern songs that remind me what it is to have Christmas spirit. Do They Know It's Christmas by Band-Aid. Now, I remember when this song first came out. It was everywhere. It was performed by a group of the most famous singers and musicians of the time, many of whom are considered legendary in the music industry today. People like George Michael, Paul McCartney, Phil Collins, Sting, several members of Duran Duran, and U2. There are certainly more, but, well, I don't want this story to simply be a list of amazing musicians, so we'll move on. In the early 80s, there was a famine running rampant through the African country of Ethiopia. People were starving, and people out in the West wanted to help those in need. All the profits from the sale of that Christmas song went to aid those hungry people. Other companies did the same thing. Marvel Comics published a comic book called Heroes for Hope. DC also did it with a book called Heroes Against Hunger, but I actually bought and owned the Marvel version, so I can only really talk about that one. I remember buying the comic and feeling good. I was proud that, as a kid back then, I was actually helping strangers. The artists got to contribute to the book were fantastic as well. I felt like I was one of the comic book team that helped stop the famine. Remember, I was only a kid back then. For a couple of years afterwards, whenever I was blue, I would read Heroes for Hope and I would feel better. I recall specifically reading it at Christmas time for the next few years as well, until I lost it. It probably disappeared through a move or something. So, on a worldwide scale, the people were gathering together to give people a helping hand in Ethiopia. In 1984, U2 was just starting their run into musical greatness. Duran Duran was at the height of their popularity, and it seemed that the organizers were able to get much of the English music scene to record this song. Yes, this track is largely made up of artists from the European side of the world, but the music and its message were so important that the song spread worldwide. It was extremely popular. In less than a month, from December 3rd to December 31st, the song sold more than 3 million copies. It reached number one on the music charts in 14 different countries. Another version was released in 1989 with musicians who were still popular at the time. I believe members of Bananarama, Paul McCartney, and Bono were really the only returning singers, but I can't be too sure. It performed well in the UK, hitting number one again. And then, 20 years after the original release, another version was released. Paul and Bono returned again to lend their support. It wasn't quite as popular as the first time around. There were several lyrical changes that needed to be implemented. The crisis now was getting help with the Ebola crisis in West Africa. The changes were important, but didn't really change the song, at least to anyone who grew up with the original. That song will always remind me of the charitable spirit that lives within that song and the people who listen to it. Nowadays, I don't see that kind of effort given anymore. We as a society seem to have become used to other people having problems. And that's okay, not to lend a hand. And that sucks. We should always try to help each other. It doesn't have to be anything big. The size of the effort doesn't matter. But to give a gesture to those around you. If everyone did that, we all may feel a little bit better in existing in this world, especially when it's not at the expense of others. The last song I'm going to cover is The 12 Days of Christmas by Bob and Doug McKenzie. This song was included on the only album that the comedy duo ever made. It was aptly titled The Great White North. The record is in no way a Christmas album. It is, well, just a song. And the song is a feat of comedic genius. Most of the tracks on the record are funny, odd, and extremely Canadian. Bob and Doug McKenzie are characters played to perfection by Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas. They're both Canadian, and it really shows in their comedy. These guys even got Canadian rock royalty to assist them in making their musical debut. Now, that may seem like it was the work of their manager or another stuffy business suit wearing guy. The type of guy that would always promise you the world and somehow always have a hard time coming through. But that's not what happened here. Now, I don't know all the details, but here's what I do know. Rush is a band that will be forever ingrained in the Canadian experience. You cannot call yourself any kind of Canuck if you haven't heard Tom Sawyer or another one of their amazing songs. Now, people usually think that the lead singer writes the songs, but that's just not the case here. The songs were written mostly by Neil Peart, the band's drummer. But it was the vocalist Geddy Lee that everybody knew. Actually, until writing this, I had no idea who Neil Peart actually was. It appears that Rick Moranis and Geddy Lee actually went to the same primary school in Ontario. So when it came time for Rick and Dave to do some of their music on their album, they enlisted Geddy Lee. That song was called Take Off. It was very, very popular. And that song is so big, it actually has its own story on my channel. Well, these songs make me smile. Their version of 12 Days of Christmas is funny, endearing, and just so Canadian. And that's exactly why I love this song. There isn't an overwhelming number of sugar plums, talking snowmen, or millionaire divas wanting things for Christmas. It's an awkward, funny Canadian Christmas that I thought all true Great White North Canadians had on Christmas Day. Now, I actually have no proof that anyone anywhere ever in the history of time has had a Christmas as perfect as that. But I like the idea of it. It's those ideas that warm my heart whenever I hear this song. The funny thing is that Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas will probably never know how their goofy song would affect people everywhere. Now, again, I can't prove any of the impact that this song had on anyone else, but to me, it's just a happy, warm song, filled with beer. My idea of Christmas has always been, more of an idea. Something that would never turn out as good as you think it would. And it does never work out that way. But the idea that we continue to do it year after year, even after the previous years was a total family tire fire, is amazing. Originally, I honestly thought it was all about greed. I mean, when you're a kid, it really is. You want presents. You want the sweets. And unless you were like me and found your mom's hiding place, okay, by the time I was 7, I had already perfected the art of gently removing tape from paper. I mean, I had to. I didn't want my mom to know that I'd actually figured it all out. But that was the fun of it. The unpredictability of the holiday is what kept my interest. Whereas there are hundreds of Christmas songs that annoy and torment retail workers every single December, none of them hold a candy cane to these two songs. Do They Know It's Christmas makes me feel proud. I am floored by the generous spirit of everyone involved. It made me happy to be human. Like when the aliens come, this is the moment that I would want to brag about, the generosity in this song, to prove that we're worthy. The 12 Days of Christmas is a holiday mainstay. At the end of November, one would be hard-pressed to walk through any store and not hear some version of this song. To be quite honest, I'm actually pretty sick of the original song. In fact, I was sick of it back in 1984 when I first heard the Bob and Doug version. But their version feels like a totally different song. It is played every single year in my house. My family knows all the words. My kids knew the words before they were 6. And that's just my family being a little odd. We all felt a little patriotic when we would hear this, and my family happily wants to scream, "I am Canadian." Thanks for listening to another story that fell out of my head. This is the last story before the holidays, and I hope you all have an amazing Christmas. This channel has been a lot of fun, so thanks for sharing it with me. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Happy holidays, and Merry Christmas. Until next time.